If you're a realtor out there and you're just looking to take listings and you're not looking at comps, you're not looking at a good market analysis, and you're not coming up with a rock solid number that you believe this property will sell for, I truly think you're just spinning your wheels and wasting your time.
You have to track KPIs, right? And how important is that? Because if you're not tracking KPIs, you're making blind decisions, right? And you're never going to be able to run a sustainable business because you're just guessing.
I would always say the best way to get into the business is to start cold calling by yourself, right? Start cold calling by yourself and find something to hold yourself accountable to. If that's 4 hours a day, you'll be able to look back at the end of a week or 2 weeks and say, okay, I called for 4 hours a day. Here's how many leads I generated, and here's how many opportunities I have now to close.
I think rolling out good systems for everything, for every department, dispo, acquisitions, marketing, all that, is we have good systems around it.
And not every seller is going to be the right fit. There's going to be people that you talk to that want a cash offer, but they want above retail, and they have zero motivation. The only reason that they would sell is for getting the right number.
So when you put your egos aside and you really focus on, driving revenue and taking accountability for what your roles are, great things can happen.
Absolutely. You're going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to make mistakes. But are you going to learn from those mistakes?
Right.
Or are you just going to sit there and say, well, I just have bad luck. Well, this just isn't for me.
Right.
It's a mindset thing.
You know, in life and business is such a good lesson, right? Is like, shit's going to happen. And it's just like, how are you going to deal with it, right? Are you going to fold, or are you going to kind of rise up? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Furman.
And I'm your other host, Anthony Slane.
And today we're going to kind of break down our business a little bit, answer some questions that you guys have asked in the DMs. So yeah, let's kick it off, man.
How are you doing today?
Doing great. Never been better.
Yeah?
Doing great.
You got a lot of crazy stuff going on in your life right now.
Got a lot going on. Moving primaries, as you know. We're moving my family from Strongsville to the east side. So it's, never fun packing up your house as you have a 4-month-old at home, trying to balance that. But
are you done packing now, or are you still packing up?
No, we're about halfway through. But we got James, Champion Moving, helping us out. But we got to do all the packing. So it's amazing. Like every time you move and you have movers, you feel like, hey, you're not gonna have to do much. You got professional movers helping us out, but you still have to pack your whole house. All the junk drawers, all the kitchen drawers.
The junk drawers go crazy.
Yeah, so it's amazing what you find in junk drawers.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's a lot of fun. But yeah, a lot going on, but all good stuff, man. We're excited for it.
Good. So today, I think we just sort of wanted to talk about just a couple different topics that are going on within our business quick direct sale. So we've made a lot of different changes over the past couple months, and we just sort of want to break down kind of the direction we're headed, why we're making the changes that we are, and where we see the future going for this business. So I would say it was about 2 months ago that we made the shift to PPC. So basically what happened was we saw the opportunity to be able to truly expand and scale nationally. We've been running a successful local model for the past 2-3 years, where we're strictly focused on Cuyahoga County, Summit County, surrounding Northeast Ohio counties. And what we wanted to do was find that opportunity to really scale. It's hard to scale when you're doing cold calling and texting and some of these outbound strategies that are really market specific, very data intensive, and very management intensive. Definitely was one of the biggest challenges, was sort of that we looked at, right? How do we scale with this sort of model?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think for us is, we were doing well locally, right? And we'll always do well locally. We always want to have a local campaign just because we know the market very well. So if we see a deal here in Northeast Ohio, we know what it's worth right away, and we know who we can sell it to, right? But the great thing about this business is it's very scalable. And like you mentioned, for us to scale, that meant, do it on a national level, and, still running a local campaign, but also is implementing some new marketing strategies to allow you to open up to go national, right? And for us, that's PPC, right? It's Google ads and bidding on keywords and whatnot. So yeah, that was a big change for us, a big adjustment.
Yeah, it was a huge change. And I think we could talk about sort of some of the challenges that we're facing early on with PPC, some of the challenges that we really saw early on, and some of the challenges that we're still seeing. So like we mentioned, the local model that we had done for a long time, we had a pretty large budget that we were dedicating just to Northeast Ohio between TV, radio, cold calling, texting. We experimented with newspaper. We did some direct mail. So we were hitting this area really heavy. And the shift that we had made was essentially we basically cut off everything that was going on in Northeast Ohio, and we shifted completely to this national model, right? So upon doing that, we realized, for one, Google does have a learning phase. We started with a really aggressive budget. We started with $20,000 a month on Google. And earlier on in the learning period, while Google's trying to figure out who is the ideal person for you to talk to, you just kind of run into some challenges, right? It takes a while to get past that curve. Right. And I think for us, we sort of realized, hey, why completely shut off the local model when we had success with it? We're going to ease into the national model, but the local model still did well for us.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the way for our business, the way forward, like we said, to scale is to go national, right? So our focus is on our PPC model. However, like you said, is like, I think we realized is like, why not keep local, right? And let's just continue to make that a well-oiled machine.
100%.
And then, just do really well here in Northeast Ohio. But we want to do, like we said in prior episodes, we don't want to do $1 million to $2 million a year in revenue, right? We want to do 10 plus, right?
Right.
And the only way to really do that is to broaden your horizon and go PPC. In my
100%. But I will say this is one of the biggest things. And I almost feel like you can't even run a PPC campaign without incorporating novations.
Yeah.
I mean, can you talk a little bit on how big novations are? I mean, I know we're still getting our feet wet. We got our first one under our belt, and we're starting to make more offers. And I know we're going to start to see some more of these deals. But I could just see, I mean, myself being in real estate for the past almost decade and doing strictly off-market transactions, how game-changing novations can really be for a business.
It changes everything. And also your spreads are typically higher on novations, right? But you have to do novations, and we're finding that out, right? And it's situations where, you could land a deal. Like we keep landing these deals in Macon, Georgia, or whatever it is. Like these, like these
Granite City, Illinois.
Yeah, these super rural areas, right? And, prior to rolling out novations is we would kind of turn an eye to that, right? Because there's not much investor activity. It's like, hey, this seems like a good deal on paper. Maybe the house is worth $200,000. They want $100,000. It sounds like a home run. So you lock them up at 100, right? But there's no one to sell it to because there's no investors out there.
Yeah.
Now with a novation, I mean, a novation is really just getting them to sign an attorney in fact, and listing the property on the market on their behalf, right? So you lock them up at 100,000, you go list the property on the open market for 180,000, 170,000, whatever it is. You pay realtor fees, closing costs, and all that, but you take the spread there. And that's been huge for us.
It's been huge. And I think just to kind of like really, because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what novations are. I feel like even myself, going back to last year, you would hear the term, didn't really know what it meant. Does it mean that the sellers kind of, we're signing an agreement that we're fixing the property up and then we sell it together? Like, how does it work? It didn't really make sense to me, but I feel like I've gotten so much more clear on how the process works.
For sure. And I also think with novations, if you're going to roll them out, is you want to be transparent, right? That's the biggest thing. Key. So you want to be open about what you're doing, right? But at the same time, I think in your scripts is you can still be a little bit creative. We call it our home equity protection program, which is a fancy way of saying we're going to list your house on the market, right? But we explain that to him in our scripts, and I think there's a lot of value in that for people, right? Because you're saying, hey, we're going to get you this number. We're going to get through inspections and everything, but if something comes up on the inspection, we'll take care of it. You're not going to pay any realtor fees. You're not going to pay any repair costs, none of that. The number we give you is the number you get. And then we eat if we have to credit after inspections, or even sometimes we can send contractors over there to do the repairs. So it's like a white glove concierge service, right? And there's a ton of value in that for sellers. 100%.
And sort of kind of breaking down what you're talking about in terms of like, so how, because I feel like a question that would come up is, how are you paying all these? How are you paying the realtors? How are you paying the closing costs? How are you paying for repairs? Right. So one of the things that is great about the program, and again, it's not for everyone. And one of the questions that we always want to ask is, why don't you just list your property with a realtor? If you're not interested in a cash offer, you're looking for a retail number, why don't you list your property with a realtor and see what they say? Because if we're talking to a seller that says, I want a high cash offer, I basically want retail on a cash offer, or else I'm just going to list it, right? it's hard to pitch a novation on a person like that when they're already in communications with the realtor. They're familiar with the process. They kind of know how it goes. What's going to happen is you're going to try to persuade them to work with you. It's going to go on the market. It's going to be very unclear. Either they're going to not be okay with the terms of the agreement, or their realtor friends that they know are going to come to them and say, hey, this property is on the market. Why didn't you just list it to me?
Right.
List it with me, right?
Yep.
So I think that's super important, is the transparency in doing a novation and making sure that they understand. Like, we basically let them know that, hey, we're going to be hiring a realtor on your behalf. The benefit of working with us is that you're not going to have to pay the agent. We'll take care of it. You're not going to have to pay the closing costs. We'll take care of it. If someone comes in with an appraisal and then an inspection following it, and something comes up on that inspection, we're going to take care of that credit to the seller. Right. So maybe let's sort of break down some numbers on how do we run our numbers on a novation, right? Yeah. So for instance, let's just say a seller wants $120,000 for a property. That's what their asking price is. We believe the retail value of that property is $180,000. How would you run those numbers?
So the way we would run that is, and we would, if we agreed that the value of the property was $180,000, when we're listing, we want to be slightly below what we feel it's worth, because we don't want this to sit on the market for 6 months. We want to turn these things quickly. So maybe we say, hey, we think the house is worth $170,000. It flies off the market at $170,000. Yeah. So the way we would run our numbers is $170,000, and we would do times 0.88.
So you're taking out 12%. What are you taking out 12% for?
It's 12%. So we take 12% off the table because we have to pay title costs, which are typically 2 to 3 points, right? A real estate agent,
6 points,
which is, we'll call it 5-6 points, right? And then the other is we're just budgeting for any repairs that we might have to do, or any credits. Say the roof is shot, or whatever comes up in an inspection, right? Is like, we're already factoring that in, which is why we tell our sellers, hey, we're going to give you this number, and anything that comes up, we'll take care of, because we're already budgeting for it, right?
So we believe we can get $170 for the property. So we're going to take out that 12% that we're talking about to pay all those fees,
which will net us $149,600.
So now we have to build our fee into that.
Yeah. Well, so $149,600 less the $120,000, right, is basically a $30,000 profit that we're projecting on this deal.
Yep. So that's the power of novations, and it really is a beautiful tool. And I feel like when we have had successful novations, one of the common themes has been, when we ask that question, why don't you just list with a realtor? It's, I don't want to pay the realtor. I don't want to deal with realtors. I don't want to deal with the headaches of making repairs to my house. Those are the common objections that we get, which is perfect for us, because what we do is we just let them know, hey, you'll have direct communication with us. We have a dedicated team here that's going to handle the realtor communication. They're going to handle all the paperwork. It's going to be very hands-off for you, right? So that's really the big benefit of working with us on a novation, is it's hassle-free. It's hands-off. And we also, with our market expertise, I personally don't believe every realtor has every seller's best interest in mind. If a seller comes, for instance, this 100, we believe the property is worth 180. We want to list at 170 to be aggressive and sell fast. If that same seller says, well, I want 250, there'll be a realtor out there somewhere that takes that listing. And honestly, it's a waste of time for everybody, because that house isn't going to sell. It's going to sit.
You list for 250, then you say, hey, this isn't selling. It's been 4 months. Let's take it down. And they're already committed to working with you, right? And then 6 months in, they're like, all right, let's just sell this thing, right? So
exactly. And then it gets stale on the market on top of it. You see a property sitting on the market for 3 to 6 months. Everyone's first question is going to be, why didn't it sell? What's wrong with it?
Right.
So I think that's a big takeaway as well, kind of a side comment to realtors in general. If you're a realtor out there and you're just looking to take listings, and you're not looking at comps, you're not looking at a good market analysis, and you're not coming up with a rock solid number that you believe this property will sell for, I truly think you're just spinning your wheels and wasting your time, and you're never going to really do good business that way, because you're not going to hold up. It's one thing if a seller's like, hey, I want 250, I'm only listing at 250, and you tell them, hey, I don't believe this is going to sell at 250. I would just turn down the listing if I was that agent. I wouldn't even take it, because it'd be a waste of time writing up all the paperwork, and it'd be a waste of time sitting on the market.
Especially if most agents are just working in the same area, right?
Yeah.
And it's like your reputation, right? Everyone especially in a market like Northeast Ohio, is, your reputation is everything, right? And a lot of people
100%.
know each other, and it's like you start doing that, and it's like your business is it's not going to be sustainable.
You're
right?
not going to be credible.
Another thing is, so I wanted to hit on this because I get a lot of questions. I know we've gotten a few through the podcast, but also just through Instagram. I've had a few people ask like, hey, I'm looking to start my own business. What is the most important thing I should know, right? And a lot of them are real estate specific, but to answer that, I think there's three main things. Is one, you have to track KPIs, right? And how important is that? Because if you're not tracking KPIs, you're making blind decisions, right? And you're never going to be able to run a sustainable business because you're just guessing.
Yep.
Right. So right away, even if you're a one-man show or you're running a team of 50 people, you have to track KPIs. And I don't care what business you're in. I'd say it's the most important.
And I don't care what kind of KPIs there are. Isaac spoke about it last episode where, I think I asked him the question, what would you tell someone who wants to get into wholesaling tomorrow? What piece of advice would you give them to succeed? And he said, track everything, come up with a plan and stick to it. And I love that piece of advice because even if you're a one-man show, you want to get into the business, you have to have some sort of metric to be able to hold yourself accountable to, right? I would always say, the best way to get into the business is to start cold calling by yourself, right? Start cold calling by yourself and find something to hold yourself accountable to. If that's 4 hours a day, you'll be able to look back at the end of a week or 2 weeks and say, okay, I called for 4 hours a day. Here's how many leads I generated, and here's how many opportunities I have now to close.
For sure.
So that way, instead of, there's some people that'll go out there and they'll just hire someone off the rip. They'll hire a VA off the rip, and they'll say, well, I'm struggling because I'm getting all these leads, but I don't really know. Maybe there's a super high conversion rate. So at that point, you wouldn't really know if your VA is doing a good job or not because you haven't done it yourself.
Right.
Maybe you call for a month or two and you realize, okay, every 50 leads I get, I close one. Whereas if you hire a VA, it turns into maybe every 90 leads or 100 leads I get, I close one.
For sure.
So then you can sort of measure the quality, right? And
100%.
you can make a decision and say, maybe this is just worth it for me to continue to cold call by myself as opposed to hire someone, or I'll hire someone and I'll continue to cold call myself.
100%. And I think another good example is like there's seasonalities, right? With mail, for instance, like a lot of people would just say, hey, I do really well with mail. Let's just do it, right? However, you can get more optimized. It's like a lot of people don't check their mail in the winter, right?
Yeah.
You check your mail a lot less often. So I think mail campaigns kind of dip off a little bit in the winter months. And it's like, hey, pull back from mail a little bit in the winter months, and maybe you double down on Facebook where more people are sitting inside scrolling on their phone, or maybe you double down on radio or TV, whatever it is. You can kind of plug and play. And if you think you're doing well with something, you can always do better.
100%. And that's another thing, just a side note. I really wouldn't, if you're looking to get into this business, I feel like a lot of people, I feel like it's not as popular as it was, direct mail. But there's still a lot of people that do it and have success with it. But if you're a fresh start in this business, you're just getting started, I wouldn't recommend getting into direct mail.
Right.
I just really wouldn't. I think the conversions are too long. I think it's too expensive. And I think it's getting a little too saturated. I think it's been saturated. But I think I know you can still do deals from it, right? It's people do. It's just, you got to find what works for you. And if you're just starting, you really have to dedicate 6 months to mail. You have to be ready to say, hey, I'm going to stick to this budget, whether it's 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, or 10,000. I'm prepared to stick to this for 6 months.
And you got to know the industry standard conversions, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there was two other points that you were going to touch on.
Yeah. Second one is good systems, right? We have good SOPs. We have good systems that we're always tweaking and making better. But if you don't have set systems and SOPs, again, it's just you're always scrambling, right? Everything's so unorganized, and I don't think it's sustainable. So I think rolling out good systems for everything, for every department, dispo, acquisitions, marketing, all that, is we have good systems around it.
And there's some businesses that are super easy to systematize, right? I mean, you look at, I've never worked at a McDonald's, but I want to use McDonald's, for example, right? Make a sandwich. What does that look like, right? You can put a diagram up and just say, okay, here's what goes on it, pack it up and it's out the door.
Exactly.
You could train a 16-year-old to do it. They do it all across the country. With this business, it's a lot harder to systematize because there's so many different moving parts.
100%.
Everyone's on a different timeline. Every seller has a different reason for selling. It's very, it's kind of hard to predict in a sense, especially if you're just starting out. It's very hard to predict. So run us through, what does it look like when a lead comes into our system to when it gets to the closing table? What does that process look like?
Yeah. So you speak to that.
All right. So so a lead comes into our system. If they call in,
See what we use Podio.
we use we use Podio for our CRM. So a lead comes into the system. Now, if it's a call, if someone calls us off our website, it rings both of our acquisition agents at the same exact time. Who the first one to answer the phone gets to take that lead. Now, for instance, let's say it's a cold call lead. A cold call lead, the cold callers fill out our Podio web form. It gets submitted right into our CRM. And the first acquisition agent to get onto that lead, tag their name on it, and give them a phone call has that lead. So what happens is, let's say the lead comes in and it's Frank, and Frank says, you know what, I don't want to sell for about 3 months. So what our process is our acquisition agent will set a task for themselves, and we always want to cut the timeline in half. So if Frank says, I want to be called in 3 months, we're calling him in about a month and a half, just because you never know what's going to change in someone's life. You have no idea, right? Especially with some of these people in distressed situations, it's important to always stay top of mind. When they're thinking about that problem, that house that they want to get rid of, who do they think about first? You want to be front and center. So that task gets called, and let's say we get a contract. Frank agrees to a price with us. We get that contract. That gets pushed over now to our transactions. So our acquisition team is now hands off from handling that lead. And now we actually kind of hybrid our dispo and transaction coordinator into one role.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand, right?
They do go very hand in hand. So what'll happen is our transaction coordinator / dispo agent will reach out to the seller, let them know, hey, I will be your point of contact from this point forward. Our dispo agent will get the property listed on Investor Lift. We'll send an email blast. We'll send a text blast. We'll get the deal out there. We'll gather interest. We'll run the walkthrough. And then from there, we'll get the deal sold. We'll get it to title. Dispo and TC will handle all the communication between the sellers, the buyers, and get that deal to the closing line. So that's what our process looks like right now.
Right. Yeah, and everything's kind of streamlined. And again, we're always tweaking it, trying to make it better, but we've had success doing that. So good breakdown. I knew you'd be better at that than I would.
Yeah.
And then the third thing. Back to it. And it sounds silly, but it's so important. And we really picked this up at that 2-day workshop we went to back a couple years ago, is role clarity.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important is when we started this, right? We sat down and we said, hey, let's really figure out our roles, right? As partners. And to this day, it really helps because we can hold each other accountable.
Yep.
2 is like, you know what you're supposed, it's clear, you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. When we first started is you were like handling dispo before we hired and delegated, right? So I knew, hey, if a deal's sitting there, it's not my responsibility to go dispo this deal. That's on you, right? Now flips were they were my responsibility.
Yep.
So I think that's so important in any business is having like super clear, definitive roles.
100% is important because again, not only is it important just to have an idea for what you're doing day to day and what you need to be held accountable to, but you can look each other in the eyes at the end of the day and say, hey, this job's not getting done. Like what's going on? Right. And we've had a couple of those hard conversations where it's like, hey, things are slipping through the cracks. Things aren't going smooth right now. Like what's going on? This is on you. And we need to get this figued out.
100%.
And
I think when you put your egos aside, right? Like the great thing about our company at Quick Direct is nobody has an ego, right? Everyone can take accountability. We're all working together, right? No one works for anyone. It's a culture of everyone's working together. We're collaborating to achieve a common goal, right? So when you put your egos aside and you really focus on, driving revenue and taking accountability for what your roles are, great things can happen.
Absolutely. So I want to break down because I think this is really important. If you're in wholesaling, you need to have the ability to actually close on a property. Now, I'm not saying you have to have all the money yourself. I'm saying you need to find someone, whether it's a private money lender or a hard money lender, that has the ability to give you cash on hand. And I want to bring up the example of our Vermilion deal on why it's so important to save a deal, right?
Which the second Howard Drive?
Yeah, Howard Drive. So what happened with this deal, it was actually kind of a shit show from the start, but we won't get into that. But what happened was it was a great deal, but we had some issues. We had some issues and we weren't able to get many walkthroughs. And we didn't have much time left to close on this deal, right? So what had happened was we lined up a buyer in the 11th hour, right? Last minute, we lined up a buyer and he needed an extra week to close. Our closing date was this Friday and he needed to close on next Friday. And the sellers were not okay with waiting until that following Friday. So what happens if you don't have any funding to close that deal is that seller's going to say, hey, I'm done, I'm moving on. But because we had the ability to close that deal, we were able to close on it on that Friday, and then we let it fund to the end buyer the next Friday.
Right. And it was a $10,000 deal, right? So it wasn't a massive deal, but like $10,000 deals add up, right?
Add up.
So to be able to save that deal, you're right. I mean, that's big.
But it just goes for any deal, right? And especially specifically speaking, and it's happened to us a couple times. I mean, a lot of the times if we have a really, really good deal that comes across our plate and it's a really hot deal at a really steep price, we'll just close it. Yeah. We'll just close it right away.
And another key is closing quick. So working with a title company who can close in honestly as little as 3 to 4 days. It just happened on a deal here in Cleveland. It was a great deal. The guy originally wanted $170,000, and we said, "Hey, we'll close this in 3 or 4 days. We'll give you cash," and we got it for $117,000.
Yep.
Right. So, and I think that was maybe a pre-foreclosure deal.
It was.
So time was like super. And some sellers are like, "Hey, time is not very valuable to me."
Right.
And that's why we dig in on that discovery call and pull out motivations, right? Because hey, if time is not important to him, we're not even going to play the 3 to 4 day close.
100%.
We know it's not important. If price is his main motivator, okay, then we try to get as aggressive with price as possible. But this guy in particular, he really valued a quick close. And because we had the cash on the sidelines, we were able to offer him a quick cash close in 3 to 4 days and got an insane price on it.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I actually just made a TikTok about this. If you're not following me on TikTok, please give me a follow, Anthony Slane, REI. But I just made a TikTok about this. I said, wholesalers, stop setting your contracts up for 2 weeks. And you know how important this is because when a deal comes in and you get it signed up, and let's say you sign up a seller with a 2-week close. If you assign that deal, most buyers are going to want at least 2 weeks to close themselves. So that means day one that you got that contract locked up, you have to sell that same day. Right. And on average, I mean, depending on the deal, I'd say we sell our deals in probably an average of like 5 to 7 days. We get them sold to an end buyer. And then depending on that buyer, some of them are using lending. Sometimes they need 30 days, right? Sometimes it's 2 to 3 weeks.
So you're recommending what, a 45-day close?
I recommend at least a 30 to 45-day close.
Or because starting at 45, and if there's pushback, you put,
And guys, you would be shocked at the amount of times we do not get pushback on a 30 to 45-day close. And again, there are certain scenarios where we really leverage the power of that 3-day close. We have the luxury of having funds to close on deals. And when you find someone who's in extreme distress, like this example that you just gave for this deal that he was asking 170 and we got him at, what was it, 117?
117.
That was the power of a 3-day close. So we have a great relationship with our title company, Dynasty Title at Bill. Shout out to Bill. And he's able to run title work super quick. We're able to come in and say, hey, listen, we'll have this deal closed and have funds in your pocket in 3 days. And when you tell someone that in a distressed situation that you'll give them $117,000 in 3 days, that's hard to say no to.
And that's the other thing is like a lot of times, when you call a seller, right, or a seller calls you, you kind of put in your head, it's a price thing right away, right? You already kind of naturally just put up a barrier already that you put up. And it's like, okay, I got to battle this guy on price. But if you keep letting them talk and pull out motivation with this guy, you realized after 3 to 4 minutes that it was a timing thing, right?
Yep.
So it's not, this guy doesn't just value price, right? So you got to just not go in with that barrier and understand, hey, how am I going to bring this guy value?
Exactly.
Right? So for him, it's like, it wasn't just top dollar, which you just automatically think. It's just time.
It's just time.
So it's like, okay, how can we solve this guy's problem? Boom, 3 to 4 day close.
That's what it really is solving the problem. We were talking about this again last episode, was just taking that very consultative approach of how can I help you? Like, what do you really need here? Are we even the right fit for each other? Not every seller is going to be the right fit. And I know our whole team can speak to that, is not every seller is going to qualify. There's going to be people that you talk to that want a cash offer, but they want above retail and they have zero motivation. The only reason that they would sell is for getting the right number. that's not really a qualified lead for anyone, to be honest with you. Even as a listing opportunity, again, if it's over retail, there's nothing you can do with it. You have to price things competitive, and the numbers have to make sense.
Right. Another question I got.
Okay.
Will you break down a flip deal you're currently doing or recently have done and walk us through how you underwrote that deal? That's a good question. And I think a good deal we can break down. It's a little bit more intricate, but the Garfield building.
Yeah.
So this,
I think we could break down 2 deals, because I think the Garfield building is kind of an anomaly. It's an apartment building. It's probably not very beginner friendly, but I think it's good to know, because I think there's so much value in sourcing those apartment deals. I think there's a lot less competition, but you just have to really understand the numbers. Let's break down a different flip that we did first.
What do you want to break down?
We have Vermilion, not the Vermilion that we just spoke of.
Dana, what's the deal we just flipped? What's a good deal we could break down? Well, that's currently being flipped. We could do North Ridgeville.
North Ridgeville.
I mean, that was a heavy.
That was a really heavy rehab.
But I think with those is like, you're really just understanding ARVs, right? So you're looking at a distressed property and you're like, okay, if I add value to this through renovations, what is an ARV of this property, right? And we knew ARV, after repair value, for those listening and don't know, is on that deal. You know, it was a nice neighborhood in North Ridgeville. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And we knew that a really nice finished product, a 3-2 in that area, would trade on the market somewhere around 400,000, high 300s. So we happened to get that deal very discounted through actually a free marketing channel, which was
a referral from an insurance adjuster. So we have this insurance adjuster called us off of one of our radio ads, and he said, "Hey, I go into these properties all the time that fire happens, house almost burns down or gets burnt to a crisp. The seller gets an insurance check and gets paid off for the property, but they still own the burnt to a crisp house, and they just want to offload it."
So he found us through the radio?
He found us through the radio.
It wasn't a free market.
That actually wasn't the first deal he brought to us, I don't think. He's brought us a couple deals that we've done with him.
Yeah. But that deal we bought for $40,000. We put $160,000 into. We basically rebuilt the whole house. So our cost basis, we were all in for $200,000. And what did we sell it for? $380,000?
Yeah, I think it was $380,000.
So $380,000, but remember, you have to pay closing costs, you have to pay realtor fees. So people think you're in for $200,000, you sold for $380,000, you just made $180,000.
Yeah.
Well, not quite, because you're paying about 9. I think it was more like 8%, but we paid 8% in closing costs. So $380,000 less, your 8%. We walked away with $349,000
minus the all-in, which we paid $40,000 for it.
In for $160,000. So we were all in for $200,000. So we made, $149,000. Now that was like an 8-month project. So our true profit was probably more like $145,000, because we carried some holding costs, like, insurance, your prorated taxes, utilities, stuff like that. So that was a good deal.
Yeah, that was a great deal. And those aren't always easy to come by, but at the same time, when you have a house like that, like you said, we basically rebuilt the entire house. Those are the properties that you can get those really steep discounts on, but they're going to need such extensive renovations that, that's sort of the trade-off. You have to be willing to do that. Now, we could have probably assigned that deal for a really good number, but we still killed it on the flip.
Yeah. And with the single families, your main way, or really the only way you're going to add value, is through renovations.
Yeah.
Right. So you buy a house, you renovate it, you make it look pretty, and then you raise the value and you sell it. With a more intricate deal that we're doing right now, we're flipping an apartment building. And the way we're adding value through an apartment building is we're raising rents, because multifamily deals, 5 units or more, are valued based on the income. So when we bought this deal, we liked it because rents, when we bought it, were like $4,500 a month. There were vacancies. Some of the units needed a little bit of work. So we said, hey, we like this deal because there's a lot of room to add value, right? So long story short, it's an 11-unit apartment building in Garfield Heights. And all the major CapEx items, like the large items like the roof, the driveway, the asphalt, the garages, those were in great shape.
It's a beautiful brick building. I mean, the place had very solid bones.
So we loved it because there was a clear path to add value, and that was through one, raising the rents of the people who were already in there because they were paying below market value. They were paying like $550 a month. We got them up to market, which was $850. So we raised rents there to market. And then also we did a little work on the vacant units, minimal work, and we rented those out. So we took the income from $4,500 a month to $8,700 a month. And we knew when we bought that, I think a lot of people focus too much on like entry cap rates, right? Because if we looked at that deal, entry cap rates they're useless, right? Because we could have looked at that deal. Okay, it's pulling $4,500 a month annualized. So your gross income is $54,000 a year. You're going to walk away with, call it 55% of that because you got to pay taxes, you got to pay insurance, you got to pay utility bills, common utilities, management. So your NOI would have been $29,700. We bought it for $385,000. Our entry cap was 7%, not very good, right? It's useless. So we don't look at entry caps. What we look at is how can we add value and what's the exit cap, right? Stabilized cap rates versus exit cap rates. So we can stabilize our rents at $8,700 a month, right? Annualize that is $104,000 of gross income times 0.55 because you're taking away, you have your expense ratio. So your NOI is $57,420. And the reason we like this deal is because we knew in this area of Garfield for a product like that, 11 units, nice brick building, we're confident we can trade that, sell that on the market at about an 8% cap rate, right? So 57,000, if you sold that at an 8% cap rate, that's a sale price of $717,000. Now, again, you got to pay closing costs on that. Say you pay 8%, right? You're going to walk away with a net sale of $660,000. In that deal, again, we bought for $380,000, $385,000, and we're going to have $120,000 into it. So $660 was the net sale, but we're all in for $385 plus, call it $120, right? So we're all in for $505,000. Sold it for, our net sale was $660 minus, what did I just say? $550? No, $505?
I think so.
What's $385? Grab your calculator real quick. What's $385 plus $120? $505. So our net sale was $660 less our all-in price of $505.
Yep.
We're set to make $155,000 on that deal, right? But we valued that. That was based on an income approach, right? So it's a little more intricate when you get into larger multifamily deals versus just a single family house.
100%.
So that's kind of the breakdown. We can go more in depth on that on a later episode, but yeah, that's just kind of a high level, quick, way of how we underwrite that deal.
But I think to speak to this deal just a little bit more, this specific lead for this apartment deal was in our CRM for probably 4 years. I think it was 4 years. And I specifically remember talking to this guy myself, and he said, hey, I have no mortgage on it. I want to sell it eventually. Now's not the time, call me in the future, right?
The power of follow-up. And our follow-up manager brought this deal back to one of our acquisition specialists. He was able to get him on the phone. We set up a walkthrough and we closed him that same day. But just to speak to the power of follow-up, especially in this business, and I think from an SOP standpoint, that's what makes this business a little more challenging, is because you have so many unique situations. It's not like a one size fits all. Like a lead comes in and I'm going to call every day. It depending on the lead, that makes sense. If someone's ready to sell, totally call them every single day. But if someone says, hey, I don't want to sell for 6 months, and you call them every day, they're just going to get pissed off. Right. So setting good systems around when you're calling people, and what we use is tasks in Podio. So what we'll do is, if like I talked about, setting, if someone said, call me in 3 months, we're going to call them in a month and a half. We'll set a task for a month and a half out. And every day our acquisition agents will go into their tasks and they'll be notified of when is the right time to call these people, and they'll give them a call. So the thing I want to emphasize is to never throw a lead away. If you get a lead that comes in and you got the right person that owns the property and they have somewhat interest in selling, even if it's not for 6 to 12 months down the line, that could be a deal in the future. You don't want to just toss that to the side. You want to put that in your system and set a date to follow up with that person, because every lead is so important. One deal
could be, 5, 10, 15, 20, $50,000. You just never know also what's going to change in someone's life in between. You want to make sure every single lead you have organized. That's one of the biggest keys.
100%. And again, it goes back to understanding conversions, and that's part of KPIs. Like, what's the conversion on cold call? 8 months, 6 to 8 months.
It's about 6 months on average.
Yeah. So if a cold call lead comes in on average, hey, that's not going to turn green until 6 to 8 months from now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's about persistent follow up on that. That's another reason I love this PPC model. One, it's scalable, but two, there's still a little bit of follow up.
Yeah.
But these people are Googling "sell my house fast" and filling out one of your forms. It's the highest motivation level, right? These people are ready to sell, and they're ready to sell now.
100%. And that's the thing, is it's very expensive though. That's the trade-off, is it's very expensive. And in my opinion, it's almost a totally different sales process than almost any other lead. I would say when you have someone that's going on their phone or their computer and they're typing in, "I want to sell my house fast for cash," and they find your website, they click on it, and they type their name and phone number in and all the information about their property, they're ready to sell their house.
Right.
Their mind is made up. They're in that decision phase where, hey, my mind is made up. There's no more thinking about it. I'm ready to do this. And the importance to get to that lead in a timely manner.
Speed to lead.
Our systems and processes are 60 seconds. We need to get to that lead, because I think about it from yourself, from your own standpoint. If you have this problem and you finally get so fed up that you go to Google and you type in "sell my house fast" and you submit a form, and you're not talking to someone within the first minute, I'm hitting the back button and I'm going to the next one, and I'm calling them or I'm submitting a form, and I'm just going until someone calls me.
The stats are crazy, actually. So if you're not making a contact within 60 seconds, it's like an 18% drop off of chances that you're going to get that lead. 18 to 22% or something.
Yeah. So it's honestly like the most important thing when it comes to those kinds of leads, especially because they're so expensive too. I mean, you want to make sure that you're capitalizing on them.
Our cost per lead on PPC right now, 200 roughly, just under.
It's sub 200. I think it's about 170 if I'm not mistaken right now. So,
and we're still kind of in that optimization period, right? And when we say optimization, it takes time for Google to learn. So once it starts collecting data, right, is like, and we send forms back. Hey, was this a good lead? Was it not a good lead, and why? Right. So once you start sending all these lead forms back, it collects all the people who are good leads, and it understands, hey, what are they searching 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months before they're filling out that form, right? And then there starts to be some commonalities in what these people are searching, and that's where the people that we want to be in front of.
100%. What's your favorite marketing channel?
PPC.
PPC?
Yeah, it's expensive, but again, is like, we know when we get a Google lead that comes in, you're speaking with someone who's ready to go, who's ready to sell, right?
There's nothing better than that.
I also like Facebook. Facebook is cool because it allows you to be a little bit more creative and get videos out there.
Facebook brought us a $57,000 assignment deal. This year, it was early in the year. I believe it was January, February. We had a guy call in, again, super distressed property. Place was in terrible shape. But the big benefit of this was it was completely vacant. That's a big thing too. That's a whole nother thing that we can speak to, is dealing with vacant properties versus properties that have tenants or even owner occupants. They really are kind of two different processes. Being vacant, it's super nice because you can show it with ease, right? You can send a buyer over there. You can ask the seller, is it okay if we put a lockbox on the property? And if they say yes, that's music to my ears, because now showings are super easy.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with tenants, that's one of the biggest challenges I feel like we face right now. And sometimes is just scheduling walkthroughs with tenants. You have to go through the seller, you have to communicate to the seller has to communicate with the tenants, 2 different tenants, and a lot of the times both of the tenants work. So you got to find a time that works for both of them. And then you got to hope that time works for your buyers. So then your buyers can come and walk it. And it doesn't always work out for everyone. So scheduling with tenants are tricky. Would you speak to anything towards scheduling around with tenants? I mean, obviously it is a challenge for us. And I feel like it's a challenge for anybody just because of the nature of you're dealing with so many different schedules for different people.
Yeah, it's just so many moving parts, right? Anytime you can deal with a vacant, especially it's a house or duplex, whatever, is the dispo process is just so much easier, and it's more valuable, right? You can probably sell it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Forget about getting in there and stuff and the ease of that, but it's just more valuable being vacant.
Yeah, without a doubt.
You asked me before we started this podcast what my favorite deal was, and it's probably that deal.
Yeah.
That was the west side of Cleveland deal.
Yeah.
Was that a duplex?
It was a duplex in Old Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, that was an incredible deal. I mean, we made what, 57?
In 2 weeks.
On an assignment fee.
On an assignment fee.
Right? So, I mean, that's pretty incredible. And yeah, we've done bigger deals, but those bigger deals also took a lot more effort. So to be able to just assign a deal for over 50,000 on a duplex in Cleveland, it's pretty good.
I mean, it speaks to the power of wholesaling. That's why I fell in love with this business to start, because you can truly find a really good opportunity no matter where you are in the country. You can find the worst house on a nice street and you can turn that into a profit.
Yeah. I like what Isaac said last episode. He said a lot of people think wholesaling is low barrier to entry. And it could be, right? If you're just kind of a 1-2 man show, but wholesaling is great. And there's a difference between wholesaling a property or wholesaling a few properties to running a transactional real estate company, right?
Huge difference.
And so, yeah, I thought that was cool what he said.
Absolutely. So what else? Anything else you want to touch on here?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
All right, I'm ready for it.
Someone asked me this question too, but I want to ask you. When in your life did you face most adversity and how did you overcome it? And I want to let you answer that, but I want to hit on something with that about you.
So,
because from an outside perspective, there was a time when I knew you dealt with adversity, and it was incredibly eye-opening and motivating to me to see you navigate through that.
I appreciate it. Well, I would say I have one specific memory that's in my head, and I feel like earlier on in my life, I was always the person to back myself in a corner. And it's like, I would kind of maybe, earlier on, I would spend too much money. I would put myself in scenarios where I'm just like, man, I'm pressed right now. I need a deal to close. Right. So I remember specifically this one time, this was with my partner, Sal, my old partner, Sal. And what had happened was we locked up this deal in Ohio City, and it was a home run deal. And I remember being at the point to where I was in my apartment. I was cold calling by myself. I was doing deals by myself, just cold calling by myself. And I got to a point to where I was like, man, maybe I hadn't closed the deal in a little bit. I was getting a little dry, and I'm like, I'm backed in a corner right now. I need to do something. And I remember this lead came in, and I was just, I was always the type of person that I'm just going to work my way out of this. I'm just going to grind my way out of this. I've always been that way. And what had happened was this lead came in. I talked to this guy, and I was like, holy crap, this is a home run deal. And I remember I had bills getting drafted the next month that I didn't even have money to pay for. So I'm like, I have to make this work. Right. I have to fucking do it. So what I did, we partnered up on the deal. He closed it. We then put it on the market, and we made over $100,000 on the deal, got paid for it. We split it. I got $50,000.
You're able to pay your bills next month?
I was able to pay my bills, and I'm like, I'm back. And I feel like I've had to teach myself that lesson. Like, don't back yourself in a corner. You make mistakes when you're in your 20s. I feel like a lot of your 20s is you're making mistakes as you're getting older. You're learning from those mistakes. Okay, I shouldn't do this anymore. I shouldn't back myself in a corner. I shouldn't go spend this money on that. I should be conscious of what I'm doing. And I feel like that's a lot of kind of what I went through in my early 20s.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like your 20s are like, the growth decade, right? Where you're like 100%. Growing and trying to get better and do all these things. And then 30s is like, all right, I figured out what's worked. I'm going to go optimize, right? Like, I feel like 30s will be a great decade.
100%. And I feel like that's what makes or breaks people is you're going to make mistakes. Everyone's going to make mistakes, but are you going to learn from those mistakes? Right. Or are you just going to sit there and say, well, I just have bad luck. Well, this just isn't for me.
Right.
It's a mindset thing.
Well, so what I was going to say, and this is a little bit deeper than your first answer, but when I had this question came through, I started thinking about myself and what I've dealt with. But something I thought about you, and again, this is a little deeper, but when you lost your mom, right? And I know that you were super close with your mom. And to me, just from a best friend perspective, looking in was like, I was so amazed at how you handled that adversity in your life, and I know that wasn't easy. And I'm sure that, of course you still struggle with that, but the way that you were able to overcome that. And I know you're still overcoming it. It's something that you'll always work through. It was honestly incredible. And it was such a like motivating thing, and learning, you know, I learned a lot from you, is like, you can really overcome anything in life. I'm sure you dug into your faith a little bit. Yeah. You know, you leaned on family and friends. And, you know, your mentality kind of switched to like, hey, I'm not a victim. Is like, this happened to me. It's not about what happens to you. It's about how you deal with it and how you move forward. Right. So like, you did that with such grace, and that always stood out to me. So, I didn't want to answer that for you, but that's something that came to mind, and that's, I mean, it's pretty incredible.
I appreciate that. It's something I still struggle with today. I mean, June 9th was the date that she passed away. I was just at the cemetery. I think it was about a week or two ago. And, you know, I like to go over there and just talk to her and just kind of pretend like she's there. I'll just sit there and I'll just talk and I'll explain what's going on in my life. And it's definitely a big challenge. But like you said, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. As much as I miss her and I love her and I wish she was here to have a conversation with, at the end of the day, I just know I can't fold. I have to be strong for her.
Yeah.
What would she want? She wouldn't want me to go sit in a corner and cry.
Right.
She would want me to get up and go make something happen. Go do something.
Yeah.
Go make an impact. Go help your brother. Go make an impact on other people's lives. Go do something special.
Yeah.
I know that's what she would want. So I just try to keep that mentality. Yeah,
it's pretty amazing. You know, in life and business is such a good lesson, right? Is like, shit's going to happen. And it's just like, how are you going to deal with it, right? Are you going to fold, or are you going to kind of rise up and do something special? So I've always admired about that about you, bro. So
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram, Anthony Slane REI. Same on TikTok. Nick's Instagram is
NF2311.
So give us a follow. Please leave questions in the comments. We want to answer as many questions as we possibly can. And we hope you tune in for the next one. Please subscribe, like the video, and we will see you next time.